So I'm glad that I'm doing this right after lunch because I'm going to talk about food, and I think that's a little bit easier to talk about on a full stomach. So my name's Walker Cammack, and I'm a student here at Connecticut College, but I'm also a professional mushroom forager. So what does that mean? Well, that means that I spend a lot of time in the woods looking for mushrooms, edible mushrooms, I'm going to get this out of the way now, not magic mushrooms, all right? I'm sorry. But so I look for edible mushrooms, and then I sell them. So for the next 16 or 17 minutes, I'm going to be talking to you guys about edible mushrooms and wild mushrooms, and more specifically about how I think the act of foraging for wild mushrooms can help reconnect us to our food. But mushrooms get a bad rap in the United States. Americans suffer from a serious case of what's called mycophobia, which is the fear of mushrooms. And this fear really is surrounded by a lot of is the product of a lot of misconceptions. If you look at, or people think any mushroom not bought in a grocery store is either going to kill you or make you hallucinate, or even just touching one will get you sick. And this fear is ingrained in our culture. If you look at Alice in Wonderland, this giant hookah-smoking caterpillar forces Alice to eat this creepy toadstool. Or the Nintendo game, Mario, where the main character is constantly battling these angry little mushroom creatures. But if you go around the world to other cultures like France and Italy or Mexico and China, these people worship wild mushrooms. And the other thing that these places have in common is really sophisticated food cultures, where the people are just really in love with the food they eat. And I don't think anyone would argue we have that in the United States. Maybe we eat the most food, but I really don't think we're in love with it. And I think there's a connection there between wild mushrooms and great food. But I'm going to take a step back, and I'm going to ask you this question. What is a mushroom? Because they lack true vascular tissue, and they don't photosynthesize, so they're not plants, and they're definitely not animals, right? But what if I told you that a mushroom is more closely related genetically to humans and to other animals than it is to plants? Well, that's pretty strange, right? What if I told you this mushroom, a honey mushroom, is actually the largest living organism on the planet? Well, you see it here. It's clearly not bigger than a whale, right? But this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's what goes on underneath this that makes up 99% of the organism. So this is called the mycelium, and it's basically like the root system of a mushroom. And anywhere in the world that you have healthy soil, this stuff is there underneath, growing and taking in nutrients. And out in Oregon, there's a single mycelial system, so one organism, that covers 22,000 acres. So that's 1,600 football fields of one living organism. So again, you have to ask, what the hell is a mushroom then, right? Well, a mycologist, someone that studies these things, would tell you that a mushroom is the fruiting body of a fungus that's responsible for dispersing the reproductive spores. So in more relatable terms, a mushroom is really just the flower of a fungus. And these flowers, or mushrooms, come in all different shapes, colors, and sizes. This one here has gills, but some of them have pores like this. This is a boletus mushroom. And this still has that classic toadstool shape that so many people associate with mushrooms. But that's really another misconception. There are so many fungi out there that look nothing like this. For example, these are cup fungi, and there are hundreds of different varieties on the planet. But just because they don't look like that toadstool, people don't really think of them as mushrooms. And this is relatively tame for the fungal world. This is a Fallaceae mushroom, a phallus mushroom. And you can kind of see where it gets its name from the shape there. But, I mean, this thing is remarkable. Look at it. And these things are all over the place. These are in our woods and in all different ecosystems. But they're not there to just look pretty and to make more mushrooms. All fungi around the world hold extremely essential ecosystem functions. For example, mushrooms are the best decomposers and nutrient cyclers on the planet. If we got rid of them, our Earth would very quickly fill up with dead organic matter, and really nothing could survive. This mushroom here, this is called a lion's mane, and it's saprophytic. And what that means is it feeds on dead wood. So if you see these on a downed tree in the woods, it's a sign of a relatively healthy, functioning ecosystem. And these are oyster mushrooms, and this is really cool. So a couple of years ago, a couple guys, really smart guys, got together, including a guy named Paul Stamets, who's sort of considered the father of mycology in the United States. And they got together and they were thinking, well, if these things are so good at breaking down things like wood, what if we got them to break down things we don't want in our ecosystems? So they staged an experiment, and they staged an oil spill. And then they inoculated that soil with the spawn of these oyster mushrooms. And then they sat back and watched what happened. And what happened in the next couple of weeks was remarkable. When they came back, 95% of the oil was gone, and there are these huge flushes of oyster mushrooms. And what they had done was they had broken down that oil into its non-harmful chemical components. So in other words, the mushrooms were 100% edible to people. So you're cleaning up an oil spill, and you're getting a delicious food source out of it. That's pretty incredible to me. But what's even cooler is that these mushrooms don't always keep these nutrients for themselves. This is a morel, and these are a delicious mushroom, and they're often found under hardwood trees. But that association is a hint at another one of these ecosystem functions. Mushrooms form mycorrhizal relationships with plants. So that means is the mycelium is under the soil taking in nutrients, and then they attach to the roots of nearby plants, and they form a trading system, where the mushrooms give nutrients to the plants, and then the plants give sugars from photosynthesis back to the mushrooms in return. And really, neither organism could survive the same without each other. And 80% of plants on this planet have a mycorrhizal relationship. So that just shows you how essential and how widespread these things are on the planet to really all life on this earth. But not all mushrooms are good to plants. That honey mushroom I showed you in the beginning, that's a parasite to hardwood trees, so that slowly kills trees. And parasitism is sort of a reoccurring theme within the fungal world, and it doesn't stop between mushrooms and plants. Fungi also parasitize each other. This is a lobster mushroom, and you probably wouldn't believe me if I told you a couple days before this picture was taken, these were just bland, white-looking mushrooms, pretty unassuming, called lactarius. But then a little microscopic spore of a rust mold called a hypomyces lands on these white mushrooms, uses them as a host, parasitizes them, and really uses them as a food source and completely takes them over and turns them into this beautiful orange thing. And by the way, those white lactarius, they're not edible to people, and these are delicious. So you have mushrooms that parasitize plants, mushrooms that parasitize other mushrooms, and then you have a whole group of mushrooms that parasitize insects. And these are called the cordyceps mushrooms. So similarly, a little microscopic spore will land on an insect. This poor guy happens to be a cricket, and they won't kill the insect. They'll infiltrate it and send chemicals to its brain. And there's no better way to describe this except for mind control. So the insect loses control of itself, and it's forced to crawl upwards into the canopy. And the mushroom has control, so the mushroom knows when the insect is high enough up, and then it kills it. The mushroom comes out and disperses the spores and starts to cycle over. And this is probably more relevant to a lot of our parents' generation, but the famous movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers, made in the 50s, was thought to be based off of this idea of the cordyceps mushroom. But these things are tiny. I mean, that's a cricket. So these would probably go unseen by most people unless they were looking for them. But on the other side of the spectrum, mushrooms can be huge. This is a giant puffball mushroom. And this particular one was found in British Columbia and is probably upwards of 50 pounds. But what's so crazy is these things grow in people's front yards all the time, and no one pays attention to them. I mean, maybe they're not this big, but they're there. And the thing that's even crazier is they're delicious, and they're a great food source. So out of all the things I've just talked about, all these amazing feats that go on within the fungal world every day, this is what really drew me in. This is what got me interested in mycology. It was mushrooms' potential as a food source. So now I'm going to talk to you about my relationship with foraging for mushrooms and where that started. So it started at a very young age in this place. This is Radiant Lake in Algonquin Park, Canada. And my grandfather built a little log cabin here 65 years ago. No electricity, we cook on a wood stove, we have to drive in on a dirt logging road to get there. And this is a picture of the cabin. It's my favorite place on the planet. I mean, during a time in human history when it's so hard to get away, so hard to disconnect, this place is a constant in my life. And I love it for that. But we're from Baltimore, Maryland, and this is up in Ontario, Canada, so we can't always be there to take care of it. And that's where this guy has really helped our family out greatly. This is Ivan Roy, and he is a dear friend to our family. And since he lives outside of Ontario, he can kind of check up on the cabin when we're not there. And Ivan also happens to be the most remarkable outdoorsman I've ever met. So I grew up watching this guy wake up at 5 a.m. every morning, trudge out into the woods, only to come back a few hours later just with the most remarkable bounty of wild foods you could imagine. He would have buckets of blueberries or all these giant fish or all different mushrooms like you see here. And then he would cook them for us on this wood stove, and they're the most memorable meals I've ever eaten. And what's so cool is this picture of Ivan was taken last year. So Ivan's 85 years old, and I still struggle to keep up with him when we're out picking mushrooms. So obviously he's doing something right. And while Ivan's a remarkable individual, he's not necessarily an outlier from a lot of the people that we share time with on Radiant Lake. A lot of people do this sort of daily routine of just being outside. So this picture was taken probably 30 years ago. That's my uncle with that giant bushy beard, and my dad, who's in the audience, with the great sleek mustache there. But they're sitting at the dinner table eating fish caught that day and probably some other wild ingredients. So generations of my family have come up to this place, and over the years, we've formed this really strong food culture attached to Radiant Lake. And it's really all about how the whole day is a build-up to dinner time. So you wake up, and then you go out and you explore, and you exercise, and you catch fish, you pick mushrooms, you find berries. Also, you can add those ingredients to the dinner table, and also you can make that meal that much more meaningful. And exerting all of this effort into your meal adds value to the food, and it also adds value to the land and makes you care about that land more. So I grew up watching all these individuals carry their weight and add to the table, and pretty soon I decided that I wanted to try my hand in this. So I tried fishing, and this is 3-year-old Walker with a little plastic fishing rod, but pretty soon I had some success. So this is this is maybe my favorite picture of all time. This was on my 5th birthday and probably the happiest day of my life. But the point is that I got really good at fishing. So this is me filleting some walleye for the dinner table. And I still love to fish, but somewhere along the line of my childhood, my interest shifted from fishing to foraging for mushrooms. And I think that's because mushrooms have something for me that fishing didn't. With fishing, at least freshwater fishing, there are only so many fish that you know you're going to catch. But with mushrooms, the possibilities are endless. They're so mysterious and so unexplored. I really feel like I'm on a treasure hunt every time I'm out looking for them. And it's gotten to the point now where in the summers, I full-time forage, and I sell my products at restaurants and at farmers markets. So here's an average haul. Those are chanterelles there and the lobster mushrooms I talked to you about. I probably sell 12 different varieties, and it's great. I make a lot of money doing this, and it's great because I would be in the woods anyways, so I'm really making a living doing what I love. But that's not really why I do it. The most rewarding part for me is calling up these great chefs and just hearing how excited they get about the ingredients that I can offer them, because they know how much wild mushrooms can add to a dish. And I mean, they know how versatile they are. You can use them in soups or on pasta or as a meat substitute. So these chefs get excited, and then I get to come into the restaurants and go behind the scenes into the kitchen and talk to the chefs, talk to everyone involved in the process of making this food. And as I've done that, I've really built this really personal connection to the process of making food. And I think it's that connection that so many Americans lack, and that's really at the root of many of the problems in our food system. So the question I want to ask is, what is the American food culture? Well, according to Google Images, it's this. I literally typed in American food culture on Google, and this is the 5th picture that came up, and the 4 before it were all fast food hamburgers. And I think a hot dog is the perfect example. I mean, what is a hot dog? No one really knows, and yet we consume 20 billion of these things a year. And it's that lack of knowledge, that lack of where our food comes from, how it gets to us, what it even is. It's that lack of knowledge that's resulted really in just this loss of identity of what our food should be. And that's a problem. And that's also the result of this ongoing process of us moving away from the land and away from nature into cities. And as we've done that, we've also severed this connection with nature and with our food. So how does foraging connect to this? How does it relate? Well, I propose that foraging is really the perfect way to get this connection back, because if you think about it, it is dangerous. I mean, if you go out into the woods and you pick any mushroom you see and you try to eat it, you're going to get sick. And there is even a chance you're going to die. But that's my point exactly. To get good at this, you not only need to know what mushroom's good and what mushroom's bad, but with the good ones, you need to know where they grow, what time of year they grow, if they like rain, what kind of trees they're associated with, what soils they like. So there's so many factors that go into this. So what I'm proposing is that foraging for mushrooms can be a tool that Americans use with the goals to make us conscious eaters again, but also reconnect us to the natural world. And for me, the first time I participated in this, I foraged for mushrooms. I knew exactly what they were and that they weren't going to kill me. And I brought them home and I cooked them and I ate them. It was eye-opening to me. And it really changed the way I look at food entirely. And I don't think anyone could experience that feeling and then go back to eating hot dogs. So this picture, this is me last summer in the Adirondacks doing a mushroom foray for the Nature Conservancy. And I plan on doing a lot more of these this upcoming summer. But it wasn't so easy for me to talk to people about my interest in mushrooms, because it's kind of a weird thing. So when I first got into it, I hid it from my friends in fear that they would think of me as some crazy mushroom guy. But my parents had other plans for me. So this is a really awkward picture, and that's kind of the point of it, though. Notice the shirt. Notice the shirt. So this is just a small sample of the mushroom-related presents my parents got me last Christmas. But I'm okay with it now. I've kind of embraced it, hence the fact that I'm doing a TED Talk on mushrooms right now, because I realize I'm in sort of a unique position here. While I don't think I'm a genius, I think there's so many mycologists out there that know so much more on the subject than I do think I have something that they don't have, and that's that I'm 20 years old. And that means that I can connect with other 20-year-olds. And if you take this guy, for example, this is Gary Linkoff, and he's one of the most renowned mycologists in the United States. And I would love to sit down with this guy and pick his brain, but I'm the only 20-year-old in the world that's saying that. Most other kids my age would probably think that or really have no interest in learning anything from this guy, and maybe just think he's a mushroom nut. And maybe some of you will feel that way about me after this, but that's not my hope. My hope is that I can connect my peers to this unseen, mysterious world, and that maybe next time you're on campus and you see a mushroom on the ground, you won't just walk by it or kick it over. You'll stop and you'll study it a little bit, or maybe you'll take your phone out and take a picture. You can even pick it up. I promise it's not going to get you sick, because these things aren't hiding from us. They're everywhere. And similarly, our food isn't hiding from us. We're just not really paying attention to it. And I think it's time we start paying attention to it, because I think it's time we start catching up with the Italys and the Mexicos of the world, because I really see no reason why every meal we eat should not be as meaningful and as special and as delicious as a meal eaten here on Radiant Lake. Thank you.